Hey everyone, Chris Carter here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. We've got Alan Saunders today, and I want to ask Alan, should the Steelers be trading George Pickens? Because a lot of people think they should, and there's a lot of people think they shouldn't. I think it's a really interesting debate point. We'll talk about that. We'll look at whether wide receiver or corner is a bigger draft priority for the Steelers right now, and a close look at the salary cap numbers updated after the DK Metcalf trade and other signings, all here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let's get into it.
You are Locked On Steelers, your daily Pittsburgh Steelers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, welcome to the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, bringing you your daily dose of all things on the Pittsburgh Steelers. As always, you can find the show in your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube, like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this YouTube channel to get all of your daily Monday through Friday episodes, as well as our bonus content. We thank you for making us your first listen day because we're your team every day. And as I said before, we're joined by the man himself, Alan Saunders. He's back on the show. We always love having Alan on. By the way, both Alan and I are competing right now in Pittsburgh Media March Madness. It is on. It's back. Now, if you follow this show, we used to really play this up a lot more and just make a lot of jokes of it. But if you see it on our Twitter accounts, go vote for us, please. We both need to help. We're up against other media giants like Richie Walsh and Doran Dickerson, and we'd like your vote to help us survive.
I'm not going to beat Doran, but I will say, massive missed opportunity. That I'm a 9 seed and you're an 8 seed, and that we should be against each other. Like what?
Shout out!
How did that? Let
Joey
Richie
back and
Doran, let Richie and Doran duke it out. Like I want that smoke. Like let's go. I'm not gonna beat Doran. Like nobody ever cheered for one of my touchdowns. Come on. Like
Joey back and donuts, you are a homie, but next, if you ever get a chance, you put us in the same bracket because it will be war. It
also,
will be war.
Harbaugh didn't even get in. He's in Dayton. Come on.
He's in Dayton.
He's in Dayton.
Anyways, if you don't know what Pittsburgh Media March Madness is, just a simple voting thing that people do for fun. Vote for your favorite Pittsburgh media people. It's on Twitter. You check my Twitter account. It's there. Anyways, let's get into the big topic here, Alan. The topic that I wanted to look at here is something that I think if you talk to someone on either side of this debate, they think it's a settled matter. It is not when it comes to George Pickens, a lot of people that I talk to, either they think, yeah, you got to trade him before the trade him before the draft so you can get draft compensation, or trade him before the season opens so that you don't have to worry about that in season. Then there's other people that says, don't trade him. Don't keep him on the team. Figure out a way to make it work. And I've heard the arguments on both sides. I've thought about it. And there's times where I considered both sides. And I was like, okay, let's look at this. Look at that. But Alan, I've come down on the side of, unless somebody is coming with a first or a second round pick, I'm not budging George Pickens if I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here's why. He will bring you he is still a number one receiver in the NFL. He's still a freak of nature. Him and DK Metcalf this year would be a 1-2 punch out of hell. And you could have that on your team. And at the end of the year, if you don't want to franchise tag him or sign him or do whatever, you can let him hit free agency. He'll get a bag and you'll get a third-round comp pick. And you'll get that while also getting the experience of getting him to work with DK Metcalf for another year. To me, that makes this an easier question for the Steelers, and it gives them leverage in trade talks. If someone calls with George Pickens, we'll offer a fourth. And buddy, you better offer what we got for Chase Claypool if you want George Pickens.
Yeah, I think the first person that needs to answer this question is George Pickens. I don't know what he wants. And I think that's an important part of this conversation. And until we hear from him, I understand why it keeps getting brought up. Because if he wants a trade, I think the Steelers probably should look for a way to make that happen. And they should probably do that before the draft, like you're saying, and so I can see that. I can also envision plenty of trades that involve George Pickens that make sense for the Steelers. Actually, Smitty and I, on my podcast this afternoon drive, just talked about this yesterday. The Packers had tried to get Metcalf. They didn't get him. Pickens is probably the next best thing. We talked about how the Steelers, if they're going to sign Aaron Rodgers, don't really have that underneath separator type like Devontae Adams or Alan Lazard that Aaron Rodgers has really loved his whole career. Okay, maybe you trade Pickens for Dontavian Wicks and add a 3rd-round pick. And it's like a football trade. You're just like, hey, we got too many of column A and not enough of column B, and let's balance it out. Okay, I can buy that. Somebody comes up with a truckload in the 1st round and you wanna blow the Steelers away, I think they should listen. But like, I'm with you. The comp pick makes the idea of trading him, as long as he doesn't want traded, tough, because I don't think the value, I don't think the Steelers are gonna I don't think Omar is gonna leak to somebody, Schefter or whatever, and be like, the Steelers would like to trade George Pickens, and then 5 GMs are gonna call waving 1st-round picks. I don't think that is gonna be out there, and so unless it happens that way, why not just keep him as long as you can make all the pieces fit?
And that to me is the thing, is he has to want to be here. If he becomes a malcontent, if he's not playing, if he's like, you know what, I'm a hold in or whatever until I get traded, then it forces your hand. But right now, and I think that might be some of the point of some of the people that say, yeah, that's why I want him to be traded, because he came late to the Christmas Day game, this, that, and the third, and he could be a wild card and he might do some things. But I think George Pickens at the end of the day wants to get paid. I think George Pickens at the end of the day wants to play football, and he knows that the best way to show that he can still play football is to play football this year and play it well. He still hasn't had a spectacular season in the NFL, and now he will have a bona fide number 1 wide receiver across from him. If the Steelers are able to get any semblance of a passing game going, the teams will not be able to plaster him the way that they did last year. And I think that that's where he's going to have an opportunity, unlike what he's had before. And now he'll be an experienced wide receiver to be doing this. So this isn't raw George Pickens. This is, a little bit more developed George Pickens working with DK Metcalf, attracting a lot of attention from defenses. And that, to me, should pose the thing to George to say, like, hey, this is my year. I'm not worried about what y'all's contract situation is. I'm going to ball out. And if y'all want to franchise tag me, cool. Because here's the thing, Alan. I also think it's very possible that that's what happens, is that the Steelers, especially if their plan is to draft a quarterback next year in the higher up rounds, and to have Mason Rudolph and say like a Jalen Milroe be the backup quarterbacks in that situation, or make that the assortment of guys, and you're not paying a high level quarterback on your roster, that gives you the space to do things like tagging George Pickens and saying, hey, we'll float this guy for a year, maybe for another year, keep him around so that him and Metcalf are a 1-2 punch.
I think that is one of the most under talked about points of their pursuit of Aaron Rodgers. You can see an offense led by Aaron Rodgers. You can envision it doing enough to keep George Pickens happy, to get him the money, the stats that he needs to get paid, and for him to have faith in that process happening right now to say, yeah, heck yeah, I want to be there. I think it gets tough to see that if Mason Rudolph's the quarterback, because you're not going to throw as much in general, not as good of a passer. And so I think that's one of the reasons that we haven't really heard anything about this one way or another, because I think the identity of the quarterback actually will play a large part in this discussion.
I think it will. And I think them getting someone who can get the ball to George. It's also why I thought keeping Russell Wilson would have made a lot of sense, because he could throw moonballs to both Metcalf and Pickens, and we've seen that work for the Steelers, and that could be an interesting threat there. But we aren't going to talk too much about the quarterback situation. We already do that a lot. I just wanted to put it out here, and I think, Alan, you agree with me. It makes a lot more sense for the Steelers to not trade George Pickens right now, despite what people think, because of the draft pick compensation they can get for him next year if they did let him walk into free agency, which would be the equivalent to a late 3rd round pick, but still a 3rd round pick. And again, if someone comes with that 2nd or that 1st, that's a different story. We could talk about that then. But as you pointed out, as D. King of Walla pointed out, teams are starting to wise up. Teams are starting to be like, I don't want the Steelers wide receiver that they're giving us away, because there's something that always goes wrong with Antonio Brown, Chase Claypool, Deontay Johnson, and Juju Smith-Schuster, or something like that. Juju less so because they didn't trade him away, but you get my point. Yeah.
And I think there are trades that probably make sense. Will one of them come across Omar Khan's desk? I don't know. It's not like it's some slam dunk where it's like, oh yeah, just get rid of this guy. Like that's a silly thought process.
Absolutely. I want to talk about the wide receiver and cornerback, and which is right now a bigger priority for the Steelers in the draft with the signings of Darius Slay and the trading for DK Metcalf and signing him long term. We'll talk about that next here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. But first, I want to remind you this show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the #1 sportsbook in America. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 in extra bucks that you can use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories and even who's cutting down the nets at the end of the tournament. With tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly, no waiting around. Remember, if you're a new customer at FanDuel, you can get $200 in bonus bets when you hit on your first bet of $5 or more. That's $200 in bonus bets for just hitting on your first $5 bet only on FanDuel. FanDuel.com to get started today and get it on college hoops action all tournament long. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We're back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast. I'm your host, Chris Carter, here with Alan Saunders of SteelersNow.com. Alan, let's get to this talk here. Wide receiver and corner have been a talking point all offseason. They always are. They're two of the most important positions in football. And they were two groups that we looked really strongly at the combine when we were there. But now that the Steelers have made their free agency moves, they've traded for DK Metcalf, a bona fide #1 wide receiver that no one has to question about. They signed Darius Slay, a starting outside corner, an old one, but a starting outside corner to line up across from Joey Porter Jr. They still have Corey Trice on the roster. So now, with those two moves, granted, the George Pickens situation looms as far as how much longer will he be with the organization. Corey Trice is injured a lot. But what is the position that's a bigger draft priority for the Steelers right now if it was just between wide receiver and corner? What are your thoughts?
That's a really difficult question to answer. I'm not sure I really know the right answer to this question. I think I have a couple of thoughts. I think one of the things is right now, I would say the bigger priority is probably that like Z separator receiver because they don't really have one of those. Like they have lots of wide receivers that are rosterable and startable and playable, but they have a lot of column A and a lot of column C and almost none of column. Like Brandon Johnson is the only guy on the roster that like kind of even a little bit fits that mold. So like that's notable. The other part of this that I'm not sure about is like when you're looking to put somebody with Joey Porter Jr. as the long-term future of the Steelers cornerback room, are we thinking he's the #1 corner or are we thinking he's the #2 corner? And I don't really know if we have the answer to that question yet. Like he obviously has the ceiling to be a #1 corner, and he's played pretty well in 2 years. I think if Joey Porter turns out to be a really good #2 corner, then corner is probably the right answer. And if he turns out to be a bona fide #1 going to the Pro Bowl kind of guy, then you could talk me into receiver.
But here's the thing. What if he is a bona fide #1 corner and you can have two bona fide #1 corners and that be a pillar of your defense moving forward?
Well, I mean, they're both needs. I mean, that's really the right answer is that they need both of them. They also need a long-term solution at slot receiver, unless that happens to be Beanie Bishop. I'm sorry, slot corner, unless that happens to be Beanie Bishop. I don't know. I guess we'll see. Not ruling it out. But I think corner is probably the place where there is the greatest opportunity to upgrade what they have in the future right now? How about that way to answer this question?
I think that's a good way to put it. Corner to me right now, if they were to go get let's say a Will Johnson or a a top tier guy there, because here's the other thing, like I'm like comparing it round by round, like if they get a Will Johnson versus like a Luther Burden or an Emeka Egbuka, I think the Will Johnson of the group does better there. Now, maybe that's a little unfair because Will Johnson is an upper tier cornerback that could fall a little bit further in the first because Jahdae Barron is a bad man and Travis Hunter is a bad man.
Well, okay, compared apples to apples. What about Will Johnson and Tedero McMillan?
Okay, now that's a good point. Now, what would you go for in that situation?
Will Johnson. I want Will Johnson. Absolutely.
And to me, a shutdown corner in today's NFL is just so valuable, and especially because of what the Steelers want to be, right? Like for example, I think another we keep talking about how they want to be like the Eagles. Yes, they signed Darius Slay, but guess what the Eagles just did with Darius Slay? They drafted 2 corners in the first 2 rounds, and they were basically like, Darius, that's your replacement, man. Just train them up, get them ready to go. You're gonna go out in a blaze of glory, and he did. He won a Super Bowl. But that might be what you do this year. You might say, hey, you know what? And even if it's not Will Johnson or Jahdae Barron or, name a first-round corner, if it's Darian Porter, if it's Trey Amos, if it's, one of those further down guys, Benjamin Morrison, if he's around in the 3rd round because of his injuries, if it's one of those guys, I think there's still a good chance for one of those guys to step up and be a guy there. And I know there's some people that are sitting there saying like, whoa, what about Corey Trice? And I'm like, I hear you. But Corey Trice was a 7th round pick who was hurt a lot. And when he was in this year, he was learning a lot. And like that's cool. But if you're the Steelers, I don't think you got time to wait around and hope that certain guys are going to work out. If it does work out, great. Then you just have great depth there. But if you're telling me there's an option between if a guy that I think is a shutdown corner, at least a cornerback 2 next to a Joey Porter's cornerback 1, that's tough to pass up right now. And I'll even compare that to, a wide receiver 2. Like if you go talking about those type of guys, Alec Yamanor or Jack Besh or one of those types of guys in the NFL draft. I think those guys are valuable at wide receiver, but I'd rather the corner that's their equivalent on the other side of that.
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's like guys at both positions I really like that are good fits. I think the idea of like, look, the Steelers are so good at drafting receivers and so bad at drafting corners. And I think that
Very
probably
true.
needs to play in this too. Like, I understand the, like, what about Corey Trice? But it's like, okay, so you looked at the last 10 years of the Steelers drafting corners, and you thought that with one draft in the 2nd and 7th rounds, it's done. That's it. CB1, CB2, taken care of for a decade. Nobody else needs to apply. Like, that's not realistic. Take another shot. Doesn't need to be in the 1st round, but I think, take another shot. It's high on my board. I would not rule out cornerback in the 1st round, although I think it'll be defensive tackle. But I mean, starting anywhere from if they happen to get back into the 2nd on down, there's going to be a corner in this draft class. I'm pretty sure of it. And it's a pretty good corner class. Like there's lots of talent there. All the way down into the bottom of day 3, there's guys I like.
No, that's the thing is I like this cornerback class. I actually wrote about the cornerback class for the Post-Gazette a few weeks ago. I think there's a lot of talent at this position where you can get guys even in the 2nd and 3rd rounds that could develop into really good playmakers. I love Darian Porter out of Iowa State. I think he has great measurables. Like if he's there, I feel like him and Joey Porter Jr., Porter and Porter would just be a nasty, nasty pair, a physical, fast, just beat you up and down the sidelines type of duo at cornerback. And to me, there's value in that, Alan. And I get that some people out there want wide receiver. And I guess we should give some space to the people that are on the wide receiver side of the debate, because they're like, well, wait a second, what about getting George Pickens replacement? Because even though you guys are saying not trade him, he's probably not around for another year. At best, he's around for two more years. And I hear that, but I think right now, especially because you have Metcalf and Pickens is still around and Calvin Austin's around for one more year, and you got Roman Wilson coming up the line, you're hoping that can work. I feel like you can get that. And I also feel like with DK Metcalf, you know that like that guy's a proven number one. Joey Porter Jr., I think, is still trying to prove himself to be a number one corner. And it's like you said, if Joey Porter Jr. works out, that changes some equations. But to me, especially with what the Steelers want to be, they want to be the physical team up front on offense that can run the ball, and they want to be a dominant defense. And if you want to be a dominant defense, you need good to great cornerback play in today's NFL, which is why I think right now the bigger draft priority for the Steelers has now become cornerback over wide receiver.
Yeah, I think it fits the draft board better too. Like I said, like, okay, that Z receiver, that separator. I was just talking about this with Smitty. Like, there you go up and down the board. They're hard to find. Like Jalen Noel, I guess. Kyle Williams is a guy like I think is really underrated. But like, there's not just a ton of those guys in this draft class. So I think when you add that to what you're saying, like I think corner probably goes first. I think Igbuka is the big exception though, because he's an Ohio State guy. I think he's really versatile. Personality wise, he's like a unicorn of a wide receiver.
Right.
I think that's the one where like he will probably be there at 21. Like, you're not talking about Will Johnson, where it's like, oh, yeah, you know, he's a top 10 pick. If he falls, great, take him. But, like, he's the one guy that I think would get me to prioritize wide receiver.
I could hear that. And, again, everything's subjective, right? You're going to get – it's all there's this isn't just like putting numbers in and that's that. There's personalities, there's styles, there's all sorts of things that factor into this. So there's not a buyer, one fits all, a buyer, just hey, you're getting one swooping answer for everything. But I am saying that I think in general cornerback becomes a bigger priority unless there is that guy at wide receiver. And if Buka is that guy, that'll be interesting. My AirPod just fell out my ear. But we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to Alan about the updated Steelers salary cap, because whereas there's been a lot of signings in free agency, what space is left for them to do anything as far as signing a quarterback, but also making other moves if there's other trades they'd like to make to acquire a veteran or something like that. We'll talk about that next year on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Chris Carter, Alan Saunders, stick with us. We'll be right back. Back here in the Locked On Steelers podcast, Chris Carter, Alan Saunders. Alan, let's take a look at the Steelers salary cap situation now that we have numbers on DK Metcalf's current contract impact on the Steelers. Now, this year they get a break from it. That's usually how it works. But as it stands right now, at least on overthecap.com and how it's listed there, the Steelers have approximately $40.7 million in cap space as far as money to spend for this upcoming season. Next year, that balloons up to $122.3 million. Granted, TJ Watt is not signed into next year yet, and that is probably the next big contract move that is coming for the Steelers is a TJ Watt extension, which could lower the cap hit this year on his stuff, and we'll be interested to see how he impacts next year's cap numbers. But Alan, looking at the space that they have, $40.7-ish million in cap space, what does that tell you about what their money is left and what they might want to do with the rest of that money, whether it's quarterback, acquiring other trades, or just holding on to that money and letting it roll over to next year?
I don't think they're going to do that unless they strike out a quarterback.
Yeah.
But like, probably figure $25 million for Aaron Rodgers. I assume that's about what it's going to cost. Could be more. I don't know, but that's kind of what I'm assuming. That gives them the ability to probably make one more decent sized move. There's not a ton out there in free agency, but there's still a good bit. There's also generally a pretty active trade market around the draft, so they can still make additions. They need a swing tackle. That probably cost them $5-6 million. So it's not like they have this pile of cash, but they can make about one more decent sized move if they want to. And I'll go through the usual cap rigmarole of saying, yes, right now they have about $40 million. There's about $16 to $17 million that they're going to need to create between now and the start of the season. But a TJ Watt extension will probably help with that, and they can restructure the contracts of guys like Pat Freiermuth. Alex Highsmith. They can create that money pretty easily. This year, not always, but this year, when you see that $40 million, it's not like sometimes you see that number and you're like, yeah, but they can't even really spend anywhere near that. They've got the capacity to not only make up what they need to spend later, and probably honestly a little, like they could spend a little bit more than $40 million if they wanted to. So I think they have one more decent sized move that could be available to them if they want it to be, and if they can find it. But Omar has proven that he's not just going to spend money because he has it. But I think they'll still be looking trade market for sure, and picking over the last pieces of this free agent market. There's still some good receivers out there. If they want a receiver, like that's the other part we didn't talk about really in that conversation in the last segment is like you could still get Tyler Lockett. You could still get and there's a number of good receivers out there. So that plays into that as well.
No, it does. I mean, heck, there's still some corners out there that if you want Asante Samuel Jr. Guys like that,
sign me up for that.
Right, like that's
the quarterback. Man, I have to draft a corner. Don't draft corners. Just sign Asante Samuel. Like, why not, man? He's still out there. Like, I know that he had an injury last year, and I think there's been some hesitation about his health coming out of that shoulder injury. But man, I'd be all in on Asante Samuel, and I think that's a move they can afford to make.
Yeah, I think that would be one too because of his status and where he is. But that's where I look at the opportunity the Steelers still have right now. I know a lot of people are like, oh, they missed out on free agency, and like I don't think they did. Their big splash of free agency was the trade for DK Metcalf. That was the big move that they got this year. Now they're trying to figure out what the quarterback situation is. But like there's still opportunities for them to go out and get some solid veterans to add to this roster. And again, I think it's important to remember none of these moves are going to make them Super Bowl contenders. This is not a Super Bowl contending roster that's being added to, unless Aaron Rodgers comes in and just goes crazy. Like, if he does that and all of a sudden we're like, oh, he's back, then we're talking about a whole different ball game. But realistically, right now, I foresee the Steelers still being that team that's hunting for a potential division title, banging it around with the AFC North, getting into the playoffs. If they can get a good matchup, maybe they can take out the Texans or the Chargers or the Jaguars or whoever makes it that's not Patrick Mahomes, or Josh Allen or Lamar Jackson or whoever. So, and maybe they can beat Lamar Jackson in the playoffs. They need a better defense. They need a better defense, especially up front and in the middle, which is why Alan and I keep prioritizing they need to get help on the D-line.
Yeah. And the D-line is the one, like Calais Campbell's still out there. I don't even know if he wants to play another season. I would absolutely love him on the Steelers because I think he's a phenomenal run defender, and they definitely could use a guy like that. But like outside, he's kind of the only guy that's like out there on the defensive, like feels like defensive line is just the first round pick. Like it just feels like it's
lined up
that direction, right? Like, I mean, I guess it could go differently depending on the board, but like that certainly seems like it's the intent at this point.
Yeah, it certainly does. It seems like that's the need. It's a strength in this draft class. It's something that and when needs and strengths line up, it makes usually for exciting opportunities in this draft class, which is why that's there. But again, they have the money to spend to get some other things. We'll see if they do that moving forward. Alan, thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Steelers podcast. Let people that can find you, follow you, and get where you work.
Yeah, Saunders_PGH on social media. SteelersNow.com is where you can find my written work, and you can find my podcast, Steelers Afternoon Drive and Steelers Morning Rush, on the Steelers Now YouTube page or anywhere you find podcasts.
Absolutely. He's Alan Saunders. I'm Chris Carter. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, same handle everywhere at Carter Critiques, and everywhere you go. You can also read my work in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com, and you can find me here every day, Monday through Friday, on your favorite podcasting apps and on YouTube. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of your Monday through Friday episodes. And hey, today is my birthday, so if you want to wish me a happy birthday, give me a 5-star rating on Apple saying happy birthday. I appreciate that if y'all do. Thanks to everyone who supports the show. We're going to be back tomorrow with more on your Steelers right here on the Locked On Steelers birthday. Locked On Steelers podcast.